I'm muted. It's just saying hi, everyone. It's good to see your familiar names. We'll get started in a few minutes. Okay, if you want to test that, good. Good.
I'm just going to do a quick screen share to make sure that's okay too.
Well, it's 1:30 and we have a couple of things to go through, introductions and stuff. Should we get started?
Sounds good.
Okay, so just a notice that we will be recording today, and you'll be able to access this later on then through the link to the meeting. It'll be in the chat. And Kristen, do you want to get us started with the introductions?
Mic'd. Okay. All right, so welcome everyone to our third or fourth installment.
Technically fourth, but
fourth. Yeah,
we redid one, so.
I thought it was four. Our fourth installment of Who Me Cheat. And I'm Kristen Rodier. I'm a professor of philosophy in the Center for Humanities. My pronouns are she, her. Today I'm on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. But Athabasca campus is on the traditional homeland of the Dene, Woodland, Cree, Nakota Sioux, Blackfoot, and Sootenay and Métis Region 4. But we understand through our virtual work, there are people here from many places. So if you want to add a land acknowledgement of where you are, if that fits for you, you can put something into the chat. That's an option. And so what we do is have a scenario, and then we will, I'll share my screen and we'll bring up, it's called Mentimeter, but essentially it's a website where you can put responses in, and then we'll see what people say about the scenario. And I just want you to know that Mentimeter is confidential and anonymous. And at the end of so we don't get your information by you responding. And all of the responses get deleted afterwards. So you don't have to worry about anything in terms of participating and being tracked or anything. It's all anonymous. So there'll be a link in the chat, or you can go to menti.com and it'll give you a code. So I'll hand it over to Elaine.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm Elaine Fabreau. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm speaking to you from the town of Athabasca, which is located on the traditional territory of the Cree and the Métis peoples and in Treaty 6. I'm the university librarian, and I have oversight for the library, for the university's copyright office, and also for our archives. And I'll pass it over to Sarah Jean.
Thanks, Elaine. I'm Sarah Jean Watt. I'm speaking to you today from Amiskwaci Waskahikan, Beaver Hills House, known also as Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory. It's the traditional territory of the Plains Cree, Woodland Cree, Beaver Cree, Ojibwe, and the Métis people. I'm the Right Site coordinator here at Athabasca, and the Right Site is AU's online writing center, and you'll probably learn a bit more about the support you can get as we discuss our scenarios today. I'll also just note that you can turn on live captions if you wish now. Click More. It has a 3 dots icon. Then scroll down and click, I think you have to click Language and Speech, and then turn on live captions. Also, if you'd like to mute the binging of the chat notifications, then under More, choose Settings and Mute Notifications. And finally, we do want to encourage you to contribute. We'd like this to be interactive, so you can make good use of the chat. Also, raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and we'll call on you and turn on your microphone. So raising your hand is found under the reactions button. And just a gentle reminder that this is an academic forum, so please be aware of keeping your comments professional and on topic. If there's anything you'd like to talk to us about individually, I'll put the right site email address and appointment calendar in the chat because we're here to help. And I think we're ready for our first scenario now. Kristen?
And you're on mute.
Thank you. Our first scenario, it's called Hit the Panic Button, and then we'll do a question on the Menti afterwards. So Joan is going to be in our scenario. Joan is a very busy student taking multiple courses and working full-time. She blocked time off to work on an assignment one evening, and after reading the description, so she's sitting down with her blocked time, she's completely stuck. There's no way she can get information from her tutor right away, and she will not be able to work on this again for a whole week. Joan is panicking. So she decides to post on a student group on Facebook. And since she is stuck, she asks, does anyone have any tips for getting started on the first assignment in course? And then gives the name of the course. Right away, students are posting, offering her pointers, like the area of the text to focus on, or the additional assignment descriptions embedded in the course and other places that are harder to find. And in addition, other students are posting and offering to send Joan their assignments, their graded assignments via email, so that she can use that to build her assignment. And now the thread is getting invitations from cheating sites who are offering to write the assignment for her. The Facebook thread has all of the students' real names. Is this an academic integrity issue? So I'm going to put the scenario in the chat so that people can just look back at it. And what we'll do is go to the Menti question. So I'm assuming that you can all see this. Am I right?
We can see your screen, yeah.
Okay, great. So here's a link directly. And so you can go to menti.com and use the code, or you can click on the link in the chat. You can, there, people are doing it. Enter to start the quiz. Was Joan wrong to post online? Why or why not? So this is a short answer question, so just write what you think. Maybe a little bit more time than I was expecting, but we'll just go with it. Because they'll all pop up at the end.
Suspenseful.
I know, it's very quiet. Usually you get to see them popping up. They changed their questions. Okay. Was Joan wrong to post online? No. Was it? Yeah. People have answered in a question. It seems to invite trouble. No, she was looking for resources. No, she is not wrong. Huh, there seems to be more consensus to the no side. Okay.
But a couple of yeses there.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's controversial. Wrong to do it with her name. Why? Okay, and I think Sarah Jean's going to talk first here.
Sure, yeah. Well, the first thing that I noticed is that Joan is panicking. So I would recommend that she step back and take a deep breath. It's really not a good idea to start an assignment while you're panicking. Sometimes when we're panicking, it can feel like we don't have any options, but Joan actually does have several options. So For example, if I were in Joan's shoes, I'd do something that I do at work. If I'm missing information that I need to proceed with my plans for the day, I'll look ahead in my schedule and do some work for another project that I'm feeling more confident in while I'm waiting to learn that missing information. So in a way, I kind of swap them. And, then once I know the answer to my question, I can use the time I set aside later for the other project, for this one. So Joan could do the same thing. She could email her tutor now and then work on whatever course she planned to work on tomorrow. And, the flexibility of the self-paced courses really allows for this, since assignment due dates can be flexible. Another option is Joan could check her tutor's office hours. Maybe she would be able to call them one evening to get an answer more quickly. She could also book a right site planning appointment to get more input. And we're actually currently offering a few evening appointment slots if that helps for students who work full-time. However, the writing coaches would still encourage Joan to double check with her tutor if the assignment instructions aren't clear. So talking to her tutor is the first best option. Regarding the Facebook part, if Joan does want to make use of some of the suggestions that she's received, she should start with the additional assignment descriptions embedded in the course that her peers are pointing to. Because often courses do have samples and further details, and these would be more reliable than assignments sent by other students. It's important to go through the course materials thoroughly. So remember that an online course is a class just like an in-person class, and the course materials stand in for the lectures. So if you don't read the course materials thoroughly, you can miss important details about assigned texts, course content, assignment instructions, and other expectations. So not only will you struggle with the assignments, but you'll also not learn important things that would actually help you in later courses. So for example, if you're taking the course as a transfer credit, the school you're planning to attend has that requirement for a reason, so that the knowledge that you gained in that course can be applied and built on in later courses. So you will not set yourself up for success later if you try to breeze through a course. Of course, within that class as well, it's crucial to ensure understanding from the beginning, because assignments often build on each other. Rushing through the first assignment and not getting clarification from the tutor will make the later assignments more difficult. It could compound the situation for Joan. Now, I do understand that sometimes it can be challenging to fully comprehend instructions or expectations the first time they're given. And it can also be hard to re-find all the bits of important information that you read when you're reading thoroughly through the course materials. So getting a pointer from a peer about where to look on the Moodle can be perfectly valid and helpful. I don't see this as any different than a peer in the classroom showing you where some important information is in the course syllabus or textbook. And I also want to acknowledge that Joan has planned her time, so she will be able to make this work without rushing through the assignment now. Another tip for time management is to make sure to read the assignment instructions and do the readings even earlier before planning to work on the assignment. That gives you time to process the information and get your brain started on pre-writing activities like brainstorming and planning before you sit down to work. And it also prevents the situation that Joan has found herself in.
Thanks, Sarah-Jean. As Sarah-Jean has noted, Joan is clearly panicking. And so taking a step back and some deep breaths or working on a different project until she's ready to take on this one can definitely help in this situation. Some of the other things that Joan could have done would be to read the assignment description and the details again thoroughly, as Sarah-Jean has said, but then choosing to rewrite them in her own words. That can not only help you to identify whether there's any areas of misunderstanding or lack of clarification, but it can also help you with creating appropriate search strategies when you go to look for the information that you need to be able to complete the assignment. If there is an area of confusion related to the topic, then she would be able to reach out to her tutor. She could also rephrase the assignment in a question form. Again, that helps with search strategies once you actually start searching for materials, but it can also help her to understand exactly what she's being asked to do. It's always risky to reach out to fellow students online and in such a public forum. Joan could have reached out to the library for their assistance, especially if the assignment was one that required research. The library has a suite of resources that learners can use on their own, and we also have reference librarians on staff who can assist in these scenarios to help students identify what the search strategies are and to find resources that they can search to find the relevant information. Kristen.
Thanks. Yeah, just reflecting on even what we've talked about, and I wrote this Joan scenario from a very real place. Myself on our time, and then we go, this is when I'm going to crunch this assignment out, and then you get stuck. It's really frustrating, and of course we want to put out a hit, but and it sort of occurred to me while we were talking that part of the scenario says that Joan is completely stuck, but we could also think about ways to get unstuck even with what there is. I was thinking about how, just pulling in another person who's not in the course or not a student at all and say, look, this is what I'm trying to interpret, and talking it out over there might be some light bulbs that are coming while you try to talk it out in the moment. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. Back to the question, the academic integrity question. I like this scenario because it demonstrates what I see a lot of online, which is the sort of slippery slope. You're asking for help with good intentions, with a clear sort of, you're asking for help kind of getting unstuck, but you're asking in an unauthorized venue, which just sort of means outside of the right site or your tutor. You're kind of looking for a study group, but you don't know everyone. So it does have that opening for it to be a slippery slope. So other students might also have bad advice. So really beware when you're asking for help outside of your course. If Joan is in such a time crunch, she could be put on a wild goose chase with bad advice, and then you're losing even more time. And another thing is, and this has kind of been alluded to in the chat already, that the things that we put on the internet are really hard to erase. And if an employer is searching your name, or a program is searching your name when you're coming into their program, and they see you associated with a cheating site, you just don't want that. So this thread has really gone off the rails. There were some places where it should have sort of been stopped. And this has also been alluded to in the chat, is the question of the people offering their assignments. That is a misconduct. That is misconduct to offer your graded assignments to someone. And so what you have there is you have an internet trace of yourself offering. Whether you do it or not, that's a question down the road for an investigation. But really, it is an offense under the policy. The students are circulating, AU materials without authorization. It is a kind of improper collaboration, improper sharing, and it is an offense to help someone else in an offense. So really sort of stay away from that is my advice.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go on to the next scenario. Just grab my script. So the next scenario is called the very image of integrity. Yáng is working on an assignment that requires a presentation using PowerPoint. They are using a mix of images, some graphics that PowerPoint offers, some stock photos for design, but also using some images and charts from research papers. They have also put in an on-topic meme for a laugh. They know they need to cite the chart that they've screenshotted from the research paper by adding a caption and including the research paper in the Works Cited page, but they're unsure of the stock photos or the meme they grabbed. They decide to only cite the chart and leave the other images without information. They figure that the stock photos are intended to be used the way that they are using them so it isn't an issue. And they figure that since no one really authors a meme, that it doesn't need to be cited. Is this an academic integrity issue? And I'll post the scenario in the chat.
Thank you for that. I was just going to do that. So let's go to the quiz. Oh, people are already there. People are already on the quiz. So recall that Yáng is using a chart from a research paper, some stock photos, and a meme. And he only cited the chart from the research paper. I'm surprised. I'm quite surprised.
These folks know what they're talking about.
Maybe there's a little self-selection there coming to an academic integrity webinar. We've got some keeners. Okay. Okay, well, on that note, I will stop sharing. And I'll chat first for a second. Right, so the first question I always prompt a student to think about around citation, academic integrity, is to kind of zoom out to the question of what is the purpose of the assignment? What does your instructor want to know? What is important for them in terms of evaluation? That's really the big issue. We're trying to evaluate learning. And so the instructor is going to want to know, did you generate the meme or did you use someone else's meme? Meme generators, you could use them to personalize and specify what you want to say to tailor your message. And then for me as an instructor, my rule of thumb is better to oversight than undercite. Sarah Jean and Elaine are going to talk about the principles behind citation and the different kinds of images and what's appropriate. But I would just sort of throw out this idea that better to oversight than undercite and use that as a rule of thumb. Under the very definition of plagiarism, the work being submitted was in part done by someone else, right? Just under the very definition. And thus it does not fully represent your work, which is fine. It just means you need to cite it. So the other thing I wanted to just throw out there is, and I love memes and I love jokes, but just to think about the professionalism of the assignment and whether the meme is adding or detracting. I know a lot of times assignments are meant as kind of research engagement, or they're meant for public communication, sort of like present this to an audience of X, and so you can tailor your presentation to that. But just think about the overall professionalism of it. And then I'll hand it over to Elaine.
Thanks, Kristen. So for me, the first thing that, and the most important thing that Yáng should do is determine which citation style they're using and to cite all of the images, including the chart and the meme according to the rules of that style. I'll put a couple of links in the chat that you can refer to on how to cite memes, because there are differences depending on the citation style that is being used. Failure to cite is an academic integrity issue. The other consideration related to the use of copyrighted materials by learners in assignments that you should be aware of is an exception in the Canadian Copyright Act called fair dealing. Section 29 of the Act states that fair dealing for the purpose of research, private study, education, parody, or satire does not infringe copyright. It also notes that fair dealing may also apply to criticism, review, or news reporting, providing that certain conditions are met. And I'll put a link to the chat, into the chat for the Copyright Act in a minute. You can find the fair dealing information in the Copyright Act by going to the link that I'll put in the chat and then searching for the phrase fair dealing. In addition, the library has created a copyright and open licensing course with links and other resources that you're welcome to use, and I'll put that into the chat as well. And I'll pass it to Sarah Jean.
Thanks, Elaine. Those are going to be really helpful resources. Before I respond, I just want to acknowledge and thank Dr. Glenn Farrelly from the Faculty of Business. He suggested this topic and shared the educational materials that he uses in his classes to teach on the topic of visual plagiarism. So Glenn, if there's anything that you'd like to add after, then we'd be really happy to hear from you. So I'm going to share my screen to show you some examples. So just give me a moment here. Okay. Does it look like you can see everything okay? Yeah, okay. Thanks. So when using images, there are two main things to look at. One is the license of the image to determine how the image creator wants the image to be used and cited. They have that right as the creator. And the other is your style guide for citing. So a license determines whether you can use an image and how, and some citation styles like APA require a license notice to be provided with the image. So an example of a license is a copyright license. Other types of licenses include Creative Commons licenses. And Elaine has another link that she'll put in the chat to the library guide on this topic. Now, if you're like me, you might get really excited when you see a CC under an image instead of just the copyright symbol of the circled C. However, note that a CC doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want with it. There are different types of Creative Commons licenses, and depending on which one has been applied, you can only use the image in specific ways. So, for example, a no derivatives license legally prevents you from altering the image in any way. So you couldn't change that image. Some like CC BY that I have here allow you to use the image however you like, so long as attribution is given to the author. Who is it by? One of the most interesting licenses is not really a license. It's called CC0. And it means that the work has no restrictions. It's in the public domain. You could think of it as attribution free, meaning that the author of the image does not require you to cite them when you use it. But also, as Elaine mentioned, just because an image can be used doesn't mean it doesn't need to be cited. So Yáng is correct to provide a citation for the charts in the caption or note underneath the figure, as you can see in this example. In the highlighted portion, you'll also notice that APA additionally requires a copyright statement after the citation. So that's what I was talking about here, that APA needs you to give the copyright and license information, whereas MLA and Chicago don't require that. But that is one of the reasons that it's important to understand licensing of images, because if you use APA, you will have to be able to include that information. And another point to consider is that even though a citation has been given in the note here, a separate reference entry is required as well. Now, if you're looking for images to include in a presentation, using attribution-free or CC0 websites like unsplash.com to help you find this type of image can be a great starting place to ensure that you're fully permitted to use the images however you like. You could turn it into a meme because it doesn't have the no derivatives license. It's CC0. If you're using a stock image provider, their website will provide information about the licensing and therefore how the images can be used and whether attribution or referencing is required. And I found this information about the Unsplash license on their website, that it can be done without giving attribution. But it's not all about the license. Remember to check your style guide, because even though APA doesn't require attribution for CC0 images, MLA and Chicago require all images to be cited. And anyway, I believe best practice is still to cite, like in this MLA example of an attribution-free image. If you were the photographer or image creator, wouldn't you want credit? And you want to show your professor that you're doing your due diligence. Without any acknowledgement of the license or the reference information, how will your professor know that you're following the guidelines? Too many of us student writers might be tempted to do what Yáng is doing because we're not sure how to cite the images, or it just seems like too much work to learn. That could actually draw your professor's suspicion that you're cutting corners. Now, if you're not sure how to cite the images, get support at the right site. You can email me, and right after this, I'll give you my contact information. The best thing that you can do to avoid plagiarism is provide as much reference information as you can, even if you don't get the formatting quite right. So look for that information and include it. You might have noticed, or you're thinking, if you just find any random image online, how do you find the license information? Well, it usually isn't stated, is it? Don't assume that you can just use an image because someone else used it. They might have paid for it, for example. If that's the image you really feel you need, then do your due diligence to determine where it originally came from. So for example, you can use the reverse image search on Google by uploading the picture, and Google will search for it. So go to images.google.com and click the camera icon like I did here. They have this Find Image Source button, though I'm not sure of its success rate. It did work for this one. And I learned that this image is a stock photo from a website with a CC0 license for all its images. It's called openclipart.org. So then I know the license and I would be able to use this picture as I did. Now that said, unless your use of an image is absolutely necessary, for example, maybe you're in architecture or art history and you need to use that image to illustrate the accompanying text, you'll probably find it easier and the best practice to just choose your images from sites whose licensing requirements you can understand, like these ones. And I did send these slides out before the presentation, so check your inbox. In terms of stock images, which Yáng used, there are other considerations because you might have licensing information but not author information. So for example, if the image is a stock image from PowerPoint, like this one, I would advise placing a note about where the image came from. So for example, using Chicago style, I've provided a description of the image followed by a note that it came from PowerPoint royalty-free stock images, which is licensed for use within Microsoft 365. But be careful. Don't save the image to use it outside of Microsoft 365 in a different context. This contravenes the end user license agreement. It contradicts the license. And that results in copyright infringement, which is illegal. So these stock images are only allowed to be used in Microsoft 365 apps like PowerPoint, Word, and so on. Don't take them and use them on your website or anything like that. You can't use it as a profile picture. That will actually be illegal. So it's very important to find and read the license information when you want to use an image to make sure you're doing so correctly. So look for the license and check your style guide requirements to avoid accidentally plagiarizing when you're using images in your schoolwork. And, your Facebook profile, you want to be able to do that in a way that protects you from accidentally doing something illegal. That's all I had to say on that, but Glenn, would you like to jump in and add anything to our conversation about visual plagiarism?
Yeah, I'll just keep it brief, but thanks. I actually didn't know that APA wants you to give the copyright information, and I actually researched on this, which just shows that, some of these are a challenge. So reach out for help with these resources you have, or ask your professor. Like, for instance, when I teach design and professional communication, sometimes, putting those credit lines makes your slides not look as nice. So, I'm okay if students make it a very small font, like perhaps 6, but other professors might not be. So always reach out to people. And I'm so glad you mentioned that some of these concerns are actually copyright violations, which when you're a student, you kind of are in a sheltered environment. But if you get a job and you're posting something to the company's website or their social media, people will sue. And I've worked for companies, we get sued. And you don't want that, starting a new job, you finished your degree and you're excited, and in your first few months you're responsible for a lawsuit. So these are great practices, not just for your studies, but to develop going forward. Like the styles might change professionally, but the concepts, the practices are really integral for your career, both as a student and in practice. And yeah, if anyone's ever curious, this is an area I'm still researching and discovering about. So feel free to ever send any questions my way too.
Thanks so much, Glenn. That's really amazing. Thanks for offering your support, and also just really great putting that in context for what this looks like outside of school as well. Because yeah, taking a stock image that should have been a paid image and putting it on your company website could really cause you trouble. Great example.
We should have this is making me think of future scenarios. Because I'm thinking about the objection, like, well, what about a screenshot? I'm taking that myself, but of something else, right?
Secondary source citation.
Okay, well, good. We've got lots to think about. So I think we can go to our next scenario.
Okay, thrown into the plagiarism deep end. All right, so Sam is new to Canada. He's studying here for an advanced degree. He received high quality and rigorous training at a post-secondary institution in another part of the world. In the educational environment he was in, there was less emphasis on individual interpretation and more of an emphasis on repetition and exact replication of work, including copying others' work, especially if it's an expert. Plagiarism was not an issue because it only represents particular approaches to the individual presentation of learning, which was not a focus. Not only did he not learn to write essays, he was not introduced to principles of citation. He attended his Canadian university's orientation where there were sessions on plagiarism, and he was made aware that there is a policy in place that covers ethical behavior. He knows that there is something very different about how he was trained in his previous educational system, but doesn't know where to start in how this affects his individual assignment. Sam's first assignment, a compare and contrast essay with a variety of topics to choose from, is due in 2 weeks and requires the use of 3 sources. He's heard that he can get a 0 or kicked out of school for plagiarism. What should he do?
Okay, so I'll start us off. And the first thing I really want to say, sorry.
Just to interrupt,
Kristen,
we're going to do the Menti.
Menti.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Okay, so this one, Sam is obviously having issues, getting accustomed to this, educational environment, and there's a lot of things that he can do. This question asks you to rank these options. So, in what order would you suggest that Sam attack this problem? I So the options are talk to an instructor, talk to your instructor, get help from the right site and or the library. The next one is contact the university for transition supports or student groups. That one I was thinking about finding other people who have navigated this challenge as well. And then the last one is just ask a friend, but we don't say who or what their knowledge base is. Great. That's about how I saw this going down. I thought maybe 2 or 3 could be swapped, but let's see here. Elaine.
Thanks. Okay. So first of all, I'll say that Sam is obviously very interested in making sure that that his work in this new environment is done appropriately, and that's a terrific thing. The library has a suite of resources on citation styles that Sam could refer to as he's learning what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. In addition to some online resources, we also have copies of the APA and MLA guides that learners can borrow. We've got the Chicago style guide online as well. And those are accessible for learners to borrow as they need to. When Sam talks to his instructor, he can also ask whether the university has any resources that can help him to understand this new way of working, including the right site in the library, but there may be other resources as well that are outside of our 2 areas. One of the things that will be important to Sam as he's learning to write essays and cite the resources that he's using appropriately is practicing paraphrasing what he's reading in his own words. As he takes notes about the material that he's reviewing, he can write down or copy and paste, depending on how he's taking his notes, write down the quote exactly, and then as he gets more comfortable with the text that he's reading, try putting it into his own words. What does the author mean by the quote? And that can not only help to practice that paraphrasing, but can also identify areas where maybe maybe we're not quite sure exactly what the author means. While it's okay to start by only using quotes, the goal is to gradually replace quotes with paraphrases as he becomes more comfortable and confident in his writing. Quotes all require double quotation marks at the beginning and the end of the quote, and that the text should be reproduced exactly. Quotes do have to be cited properly in a work, and the citation includes information about who and where the quote comes from, as well as the page number. Depending on the citation style and the source of the quote, it may also include when the quote was written or other information. So for example, if the quote came from a journal article, citations generally include the name of the article and the name of the journal, but not the place of publication. If a quote is from a book, it will include the name of the book and often the place of publication and the publisher's name. Providing a citation will help Sam to avoid accidental plagiarism, which it seems he's very concerned about. If you're taking notes as you read sources, you want to be able to include in your paper, it's really important to make sure that you differentiate in your notes between a direct quote, your own thoughts, and a paraphrase, so that you can be sure to distinguish between them when you write your paper. There's different ways to handle this, but one way to do it is to get in the habit of writing down the full citation for a direct quote in your notes as you're writing them, or to copy and paste them as, depending on which method you're using. Paraphrases also have to be cited, albeit differently, so you can make a note of the citation for a paraphrase in your notes as well. If you're writing your own thoughts down, you should differentiate these as well, maybe by using a different text color or putting your comments into a box, using italics, just so that you don't mix them up with the direct quotes or the paraphrases. And I'll turn it over to Sarah Jean.
Thanks, Elaine. That's great. I was a little bit biased because my initial thought was to advise Sam to immediately seek out the Writing Center, which at AU is the right site. However, upon reflection, I did choose instructor on the Mentimeter, partly because Sam might even need his instructor's guidance on where to find the Writing Center. But if he did need to find it on his own, usually a Writing Center is listed under supports or services for current students on the website. And, everything might be kind of new. If Sam doesn't know how to book an appointment, he could be proactive, look for the contact information for the writing coaches to email them or call them and get their support. Things that we could do to help Sam would be understand basic strategies for avoiding plagiarism, like understanding his assignment, reading the text for understanding, paraphrasing and quoting effectively, like Elaine mentioned, and citing according to the style guide required by the course. Elaine hinted at this, and one thing that Sam will need to get comfortable and confident with is writing in his own voice. Previously, he's relied a lot on others' voices, so this will probably take practice over time, and is something he should continue to be aware of as he works on his own and with a writing coach. One thing I'll mention is remember that the first assignment is often partially to gauge where the student is at. It's not always reasonable to expect yourself to produce your very best work at the beginning of a course. Sam can use the feedback that he gets from his instructor on this assignment to identify and work on the areas for improvement. One idea to help with this would be to choose a topic for his compare and contrast essay that he feels comfortable with, maybe something he already knows a bit about or enjoys, and that way, because everything else is new, it gives him something familiar within the assignment to remove that potential cause of writing anxiety. And this will also help him generate content without over-reliance on the research sources. A couple of other tips are, don't begin writing immediately after that topic is chosen. Brainstorm first. Come up with as many points as you can. Choose the most compelling ones, and then seek out the evidence that supports those points. That way, this is all coming from within him, and he's finding sources that will support his own points. Sam will also need to sharpen and use his critical thinking skills to make decisions like which of the points are the strongest. And a writing coach could help with this as well. Sam could use the PEA method to ensure he brings his own voice to his writing. So in the essay's body paragraphs, he can use the formula of 1, making a P, point, which is his own idea, his own voice. And then 2, bringing an E, evidence, which is information from his research, and thus made up of others' voices. And finally, 3, A, analyzing, which is when he gives his own explanation of the evidence and its relevance to the point he's making. So analysis is also in his voice. So by Sam presenting points before giving evidence and then analyzing the evidence after presenting it, the majority of the essay will be in his own voice. So a good rule of thumb would be to give at least 1 to 2 sentences of analysis or explanation per quote or paraphrase to produce a well-balanced paragraph and a well-developed argument. Sometimes analysis and paraphrasing can even be done in the same sentence. You could use a template like Bell's statement that blah, blah, blah. You could do a paraphrase, demonstrates something, and this something is your analysis. So plagiarism doesn't have to be so scary. There are formulas that you can follow to format quotes, paraphrasing effectively, and citing all information that's not your point or analysis, and you'll show that you're putting forth your best effort.
Yeah, so just thinking about a lot of the things we've talked about and Sam's situation, it's really, it's important to talk to your instructor. we work at an online institution. You're taking courses at an online institution. There's quite a distance in the virtual education. And the more that you can reach out to your instructor and say, hey, these assignment instructions look really different than what I'm used to. I'm finding university resources. I've got an appointment here. I'm reading this here about how to develop my voice as a writer. But I just want you to know that, can I have some, or I just want to ask for maybe some extra feedback, or can we have an appointment to talk about your expectations? If your instructor knows that, they're much more likely to take away that big scary plagiarism cliff and say, hey, this student is making a really honest effort to try to produce an assignment that is representative of their ability. So Sam is actually in a really good position because he's coming into an educational environment and he has the benefit of knowing that he doesn't know all of the norms associated with how to produce assignments at this institution. So that's good. It's good to know that you don't know. And so he can, take an educational approach with his instructor to try to develop as a writer. I'm trying to think. Yeah, so the other thing that I think is really important to think about in moving between the two educational environments is developing the ability to critique or analyze or evaluate a source is something that we develop through our whole educational career. We're still working on it as learners. So I just don't want him to go into the new environment and think, oh, everyone else here has a writing voice that they know how to analyze and I don't. It's a process of developing the ability to critique or take that, the way that Sarah Jean was talking about the sentence starters, using a source. So-and-so describes X, right? We're taking a perspective of, we're entering a conversation and using someone else's ideas and doing that with our own perspective. Developing that takes time. Yeah, so he will get more comfortable over time arguing, defending a position, and synthesizing sources. You'll develop that voice, that authority voice, and that's something to do with the right site. But I was also thinking about one of the other suggestions on Mentimeter about reaching out for student groups, just to think about how to connect with other people who have gone through this in a similar way, have a shared experience, and to say, this isn't what I thought my assignments would be like. How was it for you? What did you do? And, people can share stories and say, actually, you know what, I did submit an essay and I said this, and this, and I got it sent back, or, you can talk to other people about their experiences. So really, reach out, get some supports. It's a journey. And, obviously if he does copy directly, it is a problem with the policy. So just try to avoid that with a lot of lead time and resources. We have a hand up. Sharon. Do you want to put your microphone on and ask something? Maybe that hand is accidental. I don't know. Oh, okay. You can't unmic yourself. Okay, maybe that's one of the settings for this meeting here.
Yeah, sometimes, even if we allow access, it depends on how you came into the meeting. I really don't understand it. It must be a glitch in Teams, so sorry about that, Sharon. And you had some excellent points in the chat.
Can you put your question? In the chat. And we're talking about encyclopedias. Maybe you want to type your question if you have a specific comment or question, Sharon. Encyclopedias are a good general start. but should not be used as a source. There are better academic sources accessible through the library. Encyclopedias as a source. Talk a bit about it's probably going to be we're going to have a whole session on that.
ChatGPT
Especially
is on our
Grammarly,
list, I think, for next time. But I mean, I guess I can share a couple of small things that I've learned. Well, we're also just kind of dealing with, or kind of finding our footing on how to deal with even identifying, ChatGPT generated essays and things like that. Just some general advice for students. I would say don't use it to produce an answer to your assignment. Your instructor will likely be able to identify it. And this is not something that is ever going to be, you'll never be able to fall back on, oh, it was unintentional. This is intentional cheating. It's a very, very bad idea. And you will probably regret the consequences of it. Ideas of how to use it productively will probably start to come out. That's something, we'll need to do a bit more research on, but definitely do not use it to generate an answer to your assignment.
Yeah, and Grammarly, I think, is also potentially a good future scenario for us to think about, because all of our word processors have grammar suggestions, right? And you can do a spell check or a grammar check, and that's been around for a long time, right? Grammarly is, let's say, more supportive than that. But the question for me as an educator, and I won't necessarily speak from the policy, because the policy doesn't necessarily speak to Grammarly, unless in the following case. It says on your assignment, do not use supportive grammar software in producing this because it's a grammar assignment. That would be very specific. But just from an educational perspective, does Grammarly increase your skill for using grammar correctly, or is it more of a crutch? And what is your goal? Is your goal to be able to use it without, it doesn't teach while it supports? Those are the questions that I would ask. Do you want to be able to correct your own grammar, or do you want to use Grammarly forever? I don't know about ProWrite. I'll have to look into what ProWrite is. I've never heard of that, but
yeah, it's similar. I have more thinking to do on that question, Sharon, but my general feeling is, I come from a background of working with students with disabilities, and so I tend to be a big fan of software that will help students who may never be able to spell correctly, say. And that's who they are, and that's okay. Like, it's part of who they are. It shouldn't stop them from being able to write a good essay, or, write an excellent memo at work, things like that. So I tend to be open to those things. And Grammarly does explain, as far as I recall, it's been a while since I've used it, but it does explain why it's making the change. Occasionally, it makes a change that it shouldn't make. So that's another issue.
Exactly. Exactly. You have to adjudicate it. I've definitely had, based on the subject matter, it does make word suggestions that dilute or change the topic. So you really have to be careful that you're not deferring to Grammarly. You're still taking that perspective on it and saying, is this capturing what I want it to say? Because it does, suggesting a comma and then suggesting a word replacement, those are two very different suggestions. So you're in and adding your own voice. Elaine, your mic is off.
Yeah, the same thing. I'll say the same thing about some of the journal databases that the library has. A lot of them will provide you with a citation in APA style, for example. But you always have to double check it because it may not be exactly right. And so there's never a reason to not know the citation style that you're using. If it's MLA, make sure that you understand what the general structure of these links looks like, so that you know whether there's anything, when you look at a citation that's been auto-generated by a resource, that you know what you need to fix in it, because it won't be perfect. Just assume it's not going to be perfect, and then work from there. So.
Wow, great questions, everyone. Wonderful comments. Thank you, Sharon and Glenn. Sharon and Glenn are both instructors here. It was really nice having you and getting your input as well, and great input from the students. Thank you so much for interacting with us on this, maybe not overly popular topic. But I am really pleased that you would come out for a topic like this. So thank you very much for spending your time with us.
And I'll just say one more thing, that every time I talk about academic integrity, I realize how interconnected the educational journey is. Writing, research, relationships, students, instructor, there's just such a big system that we're all navigating. And please reach out to us while you're doing your courses.
All right, thanks. We'll look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.